All right, so welcome everybody to this New Year, New You webinar. My name's Anita Voth, and I'm super excited to be here today to present New You, New Year, at least my part of it. And thank you all for being here. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about who I am, and then we'll jump right into the webinar. So I've been an entrepreneur now for over 30 years and have worked both with teams and independently. When I was 24, I started my first company, which was now called G Adventures, or used to be called Gap Adventures. And it is now a global adventure travel company and one of the top 10 largest in the world. So after selling that in 1999, I actually spent a year traveling around Mexico. And then I went on to have 3 kids. I became licensed as a financial advisor, and I built a business for myself in that field, as well as supporting small businesses like Influence Publishing. So I also gravitated to helping women specifically, financially and personally, when I helped start a nonprofit called Shape Your World Society, which is still running today as well. So I've worn many hats in my life. And most recently, about 3 years ago now, moved in with my boyfriend and his 2 children. So I feel like life is continually growing and changing, and I'm sure you guys can relate to that. So through all these experiences, both personal and business, the common thread for me was communication. So this led me to start training in NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. And I became a master practitioner in this field. So I know that life will continue to change for me and those around me. And I think the key is to being flexible and being able to adapt well to those changes. So to do that, I need to understand my core identity. So who I am at the core. So before I get into a bit of teaching, I want to read you a little story. Have you guys heard of Wayne Dyer?
Yep.
Yeah, he's a famous, doctor. He's written a lot of books and been on a lot of shows. But in one of his programs, he read a story that a student of his was asked to write. She was asked to write an autobiography in 1 page. And this is what she wrote. And I'm sure maybe as I'm reading it, you can think of where do you fit into this story. So here's what she wrote. Chapter 1. I walk down the street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I fall in. I'm helpless. It's not my fault. It takes forever to find my way out. Chapter 2. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I pretend I don't see it. I fall in again. I can't believe I'm in the same place. But it isn't my fault. And it still takes me a long time to get out. Chapter 3. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I see it there. I still fall in. It's a habit. My eyes are open. I know where I am. It is my fault. I get out immediately. Chapter 4. I walk down the same street. There's a deep hole in the sidewalk. I walk around it. Chapter 5. I walk down another street. Isn't that a great kind of way to define your life story, right? And I think we're all at some point on that street, whether we're still in the hole or we're still seeing the hole, or hopefully our goal is to get to another street.
And then I literally did fall in a hole 18 months ago. So.
Yes, you did. So that's metaphoric and realistic for you.
Yeah.
So as women, we all wear a lot of hats, right? Like we can be mothers, we can be partners, business owners, like so many things happen in our lives. And for me, 3 years ago when I moved in with my boyfriend, the year before that, it was the first year in 52 years that I ever lived on my own. And that was a big milestone for me. I became an empty nester, but also single. And I felt lost for a little while. And partly that's because, part of my identity was wrapped up in what I had been doing. So at that point, I was a business owner and a mother. And suddenly the whole mothering piece, not that it ever ends, but that changed in my life, right? So for many of you, it could be, this whole pandemic, the last 3 years, businesses have changed a lot from that. Or it could be divorce or empty nester or, so many different things, retirement. There's so many different things that happen that change our lives. So again, the important element is to discover how to move through these things with great ease and confidence and grace without being attached to them. So we're going to explore a little bit about that today. And before I go into that, I just want to explain Julie and I, so we've been working together for a number of years with me as business support for her, but we started realizing we have a lot of things in common. And we also have the same heart for people to be able to grow and change and learn and develop. So we decided to put this workshop together, and talk about Julie's side, which is kind of your soul purpose and setting goals and manifesting those goals, with my side of kind of understanding who you are, your identity at the core, so that you know what your soul purpose is and so that you can walk into that with confidence. And that kind of grew this webinar that we're doing today, and also other ones that we'll talk about later. So that's what brings us here today. So we're going to go a little bit back and forth and talk about our different parts, and hopefully you'll be able to identify with different aspects of what we're going to talk about. So I'm just going to start with discovering your true identity. So it is a 7 kind of step process to get to that, which we won't go through all of that in this short webinar, but I'm just going to briefly talk about some aspects of it. So the first step is awareness. And this is, a lot of people think they've arrived when they become aware. So when they're aware that their situation, how they feel about it, it is the first step, but we don't want to get stuck in awareness, because awareness should only be bringing us to movement, okay? The next step is most people identify with the roles that they play or the titles that they hold, but you are more than the roles that you play. And we'll look at what's different between the roles and your true identity in a second. The third step is letting go of the past. So this is super important because the past can often hold us back from moving forward. And there can be negative emotions and limiting beliefs that hold you back that you're not even aware of. So we are going to talk a little bit about those beliefs here today as well. Step 4 is looking at experiences that you want to have in your future versus only the goals. And we're going to go into that today as well. And then step 5 is discovering who you really are at the core. Step 6 is testing that core identity. And then the final part is installing that core identity. So we won't be able to go into all of that today, unfortunately, but we will go into some things that will give you some key takeaways. So the first one is identity versus roles. Now, it might seem obvious on the surface. However, people often really identify with the role that they play. And when that role changes, they don't know who they are anymore. So identity is the core you, the part which stays constant no matter what's happening around you. We aren't always consciously aware of our core essence, but when we're out of alignment with our true identity, we know that feeling when something just doesn't feel right. We tend to identify with our roles or titles, mistaking those for our identity, when in fact they are identifying the different aspects of our experiences. And sometimes our roles hold us locked in the past, right? So if I said, oh, my role is a mother of these 3 children, and now they're out living their life, living their best life on their own, and I no longer am needed in that way, that can feel like a huge loss, right? And the reason why the difference between roles and identity is so important to understand is that because we confuse the two, when those roles change, we think we've lost who we are, when in fact who we are is still inside us, and we just need to identify with that. So a story that I had when I mentioned when I was talking about my past is that when I was 24, I started an adventure travel company. And it pretty much like consumed me, but in a very good way. I didn't have kids at the time, and I was traveling all over the world and just loving what I did. And I had a business partner. And at a certain point around year 7 in that journey, we realized that our differences in style, in morals and core values were not aligned, and somebody had to go. So I left the company. At that time, I had 2 small children, but my husband was staying home with the kids and I was at work. So that was a very strong identity I had with work. As even though I had children at the time, they weren't my full identity. Work was still my core identity. And so when I left that, I felt very, very lost for a long time. And even just, I thought, oh, it's going to be great. I can have time with my kids. They were, I'd say 1 and 3 years old at the time. And I found, sitting on the floor playing Lego was killing me because I didn't have that patience built in. I didn't have that grid for, the child conversation. My days were filled with adult conversations and running, I had 65 employees and I was on the phone all the time. I was doing lots of things in a very adult world. So to suddenly go from that to child world of like playing Lego on the floor or whatever it was like literally I kind of sneak a look at my watch and be like, that was 10 minutes. How does anybody do this all day? I couldn't manage, but it took about a year before I could adjust to that. And, at that time, had I really understood this, that who I am at the core doesn't change. It's that was just a role that I played in my business that could have really helped me. And now it doesn't stop you from going through what you have to go through, whether that's some grief or whether that's a bit of unhappiness for a while or whatever feelings you're going to feel, those will still come. But when we understand who our true core is, then we can manage those feelings a lot better. I think Julie has a great story about this too, and it's a good segue to pass it over to Julie because she had a major event happen in her life about a year and a half ago now. So Julie, maybe you want to introduce yourself and chat a little bit about how one of your identities changed, right? Or your roles changed.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anita. And I have to apologize if there's some background noise. I didn't get a chance to bring my microphone, so I'm hoping that it's not going to be too disturbing.
I can't hear anything, so.
Oh, good. Yes. So as Anita said, I did have a very big life-changing event that happened to me when my fiance died last year. And at the same time, I actually almost died myself because I had pneumonia and I was in the hospital. Maybe I'll just come back a little bit first and talk a little bit about, how I have most certainly identified with different roles in my life. I sometimes feel like I've had like 7 lives because of all the different roles that I've played. But I actually left England in 1998 because I was burnt out as a marketing executive. I was traveling around the world first class, and I was, I had identified, just like Anita, with that role of a businesswoman. I chose not to have children, and I wasn't really interested in the family life at all. Just business, it really was all that I was about. But then at the age of 32, I realized, well, is this really it? Is that really all that life was? And I definitely identified that, I was the child of Margaret Thatcher. So for people that know English politics, she was called the Iron Lady. And, she was all about, power as a woman and stepping into your power. And so I was very influenced by that. And I feel at that time that I didn't know what my core essence was or who I even was as a woman. And so I escaped England. I was like, I don't think this relates to me. I can't, it doesn't feel right. And so I left England and I left my family. I left my husband and I went off sailing around the world, and I'd never been sailing before. So that was a bit of a brave move for me. But I think what I was trying to do was, as Anita's saying, I feel like I had an awareness that this was not the true me, and that I had been identifying with different roles, but I'd never had the opportunity to even explore anything other than what I was doing, because I lived on a tiny little island called England. And, you know, there's not, it's very limiting, you know, your beliefs are very limiting because of the way that I was raised, you know, in England, that this is the way it is, and this is the way that you move forward in life. So I ended up traveling for 7 years. And so there you see me and Anita have a lot in common with the travel theme as well. And through that traveling, I actually started to understand, you know, what my true identity might be. But I still felt a little lost, you know, and I guess at the time I was thinking, well, is maybe if I go here or here, you know, the geographical cure where you say, well, I don't belong in England and I don't belong in Africa and I don't belong in Thailand and maybe I belong in Canada. So that's how I ended up in Canada. And, you know, the real key for me understanding my identity was writing my book. So I had a lot of people telling me, oh my goodness, your life is so interesting, you should write a book. And so I had 1 year where I couldn't work in Canada, and I thought, well, this is my opportunity to write that book and write that story. What I didn't realize at the time was that that was the main key to my identity and my true identity. And it wasn't until I started to write the book and actually kind of reflect and pick up the breadcrumbs and the clues as to, you know, what I was attracted to in my life and what I enjoyed, that then I could start to bring this all together and actually begin to reflect and understand, oh, well, this is why I did this in my life, and that is why I enjoy doing that. And I realized that everything was you know, linked, and everything was a clue to what my true identity was. And the book writing and the development and the research to understand how to get published ended up being a true indicator as to what my role, what my true identity is in the world. And I ended up teaching other people how to write their stories, using my kind of knowledge and background in marketing. And then that led me to then become a book publisher, because it was an organic way forward from teaching people how to write their stories to now teaching people how to write their stories and publish them as well. And so now I'm really beginning to understand what my true identity is. And, you know, fast forward to now, 12 years later, I had a very successful publishing company. I've published over 200 authors, and really started to realize that that is how I can be of service to the world, helping people to discover their true self, to discover their true soul calling by examining your story, reflecting on your story. So, you know, even though originally I'm in this industry of book publishing, as the years went on, I realized that this is the true purpose of what I'm doing. I'm actually helping other people to now understand what their true identity is. And, you know, as I understood myself more, I ended up in Mexico. I've now been 4 years in Puerto Vallarta. I understand that the values of Mexico, and particularly Puerto Vallarta, are a lot more aligned with my true values and my true identity of who I am as a person, which is coming really from, you know, from love and compassion and being of service to other people. And I feel like this is most definitely home. And, you know, and then I started to create my own family with my fiance, my Mexican fiance. And then, unfortunately, he passed away last August. And, you know, that again, as Anita's saying, that would have been very easy for me to identify with that role, you know, as having a say and living this very different alternative lifestyle, salsa dancing and dancing through life, you could say. But instead of that, I realized that this was actually that really helped me to understand what my true identity was, and realize that actually I could step into something a lot bigger, much bigger than I ever anticipated, beyond a book publisher, but now actually creating a place where other people can influence other people and help other people. And what I have now is the House of Influence, where we have multiple ways to actually tell our stories, not just a book, but podcasts and speaking, and creating a place where people can co-create content. So I feel like now everything that I've been going through pointed to this exact moment. So I feel now like I really truly know my identity, and I don't have to look at my past and let that influence me. You know, even though it's you know, my life in England is my family's still there, but it's, you know, I'm not influenced by that and that upbringing anymore. I know that I've stepped into my true identity. So I feel that together what Anita and I are doing is helping people to understand how to get to that point. And what I still feel is very important is sharing our stories and understanding, you know, how we can reflect and understand and then get to our true identity in that way. So, yeah.
Beautiful. I love that. You know, when I look back on my life too, when I see different things that at the time I didn't understand them, now I realize they were all part of moving me towards understanding myself, right? Because we aren't just single faceted. So I'm going to share screen because I want to share a slide with you for this next part. All right. So NLP, I don't know if you guys, I know, Sue, you've heard that term before. Barb, do you know what NLP is?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. So NLP is a model of communication, and I just want to talk a little bit about that because it really helps us to understand how to communicate and what that means in our own life. So before we begin to look at identity, it's important to understand how we process information and make sense of our experiences. And an experience can be anything from, you know, walking the dog to a major life event, right? So this communication model helps us understand how we process that. And it's based on the different filters that we have. So every second, we are bombarded with about 2.3 million pieces of information, okay? Now, our logical mind can only hold about 7 plus or minus 2 at any given time, which thank goodness, because I don't know if you've seen that movie Lucy, where she just ends up going crazy because she can process too many pieces of information. But everything beyond what is in our conscious awareness is stored in our unconscious level, okay? So just because we're only processing 7 at a time doesn't mean the rest aren't coming in. So in order to make sense of our experience, we run it through these filters. But before we run our experience through the filters, it has actually no meaning. It's raw data. And we sometimes forget that because the second something happens, we feel something, right? But that thing, I always like to think of it like, if this happened to someone else, would they have the same reaction as myself? And often you can say, no, like someone else went through that and they were happy that that happened, and I'm sad that that happened. So that means we have different filters that we're processing that information through. And that the reason that's so important to know is then we can understand that this is just our personal experience. It is not the truth, or it is not what everybody is feeling, okay? So the first filter that we run information through is called the deletion filter, and thank goodness for the deletion filter. It's also known as the sanity filter. This is so we can ensure that we don't have overwhelm, right? So just a quick exercise, if you look around the room that you're in right now, I want you to count how many red things you see in 5 seconds. Okay, now I want you to close your eyes. And I'm going to ask you, how many blue things did you see? So this is an example of how we delete information, okay? Because you were only looking for red things. So you didn't see the blue things. And so it just shows us that what we're focusing on, if we're not focusing on something, we're not going to see it, okay? And this is super important because it has a huge impact on relationships. So for example, I live with a stepson who's 20, and it's like not fun, okay? He's a boy, he's not my kid, and he acts like a teenager, even though he's 20. And anyway, but understanding that when he maybe doesn't hear, or when I ask him, why didn't you do this? And he says, I didn't know I had to. It's not because he's purposely being rude or purposefully being like not listening to me, but it was his deletion filter. So he focused on something I said in the conversation, and then his mind went somewhere else. And so that's not to say that's an excuse for someone not doing things, but it helps me understand to then respond to him in a kinder way. And next time that I have something super important for him not to delete, I can use that filter knowledge to my advantage too, right? And ask him to repeat it. So it's really helpful for relationships. The next filter is called the distortion filter. So this is also known as the creativity filter. And this is what we use to create anything that doesn't already exist, okay? So if you, again, look around your room, everything in there at one point was a thought or an idea first. So someone said, oh, I'm going to make a table. And before it existed, they had to think it into existence, okay? So reality is only in this room now. But when you think about what you did yesterday or what you're going to do later in the day, you're actually using your distortion filter. So when you set a goal, you're using your distortion filter because it hasn't existed yet. You're thinking something into existence in the future. So another way to look at this is if you think about something that hasn't happened yet, and I'm like, we all have to admit that we do this, but we think ahead, oh, when I meet this person, I'm gonna, whatever, it's someone you don't want to see, or you start thinking about the conversation and you start having a feeling about that, right? So whether it's anger or anxiousness or happiness, it hasn't even happened yet. So we are using our distortion filter there as well. So we also use it to create goals, and Julie's going to talk about that in a minute. And that is a goal of what you don't want, as well as a goal of what you do want. So the minute you think about something that hasn't happened yet, if it's negative, like, oh, it's going to be terrible when I meet this person, they're going to be this or whatever, then we're actually bringing that into being. Okay, because we're thinking our body doesn't know the difference, and it's using all those emotions going through your body. So I always say, if you don't know what's going to happen, you might as well make up something good, because either way you're making it up, okay, because it hasn't happened yet. So I really focus a lot on trying to think that way, is I might as well make up something good because it hasn't happened yet anyway. So, and as soon as I think about something good, guess what's being released in my body is lots of really good hormones, and I feel better. This is not always about, but you say, oh, that's not realistic because I know that's not going to happen. The thing is, this is about you, okay? So if you can feel good by thinking, this is going to go really well when I meet this person, it's going to go smoothly, and I know I'm going to come out of there with what I needed to express. And if you think that way, guess what? You're thinking that into being as well. So the distortion filter is super important even to get what you want out of life. So then there's the generalization filter. So this relates to how we learn, okay? Where this can limit you in your life is by having a one-time experience, and then you extrapolate that to every future experience. So if you said, oh, when I walked the dog last week, the dog ate something you shouldn't have and got sick. And now you can move forward thinking, I'm afraid to walk the dog. I can't walk the dog there because this could happen again. Okay. So when we generalize, we cut ourselves off from lots of good things happening. And also, again, going back to what I said earlier, not everyone has the same experience. You could walk your dog 100 days in a row and it could be the best thing ever. So why do we pick that one day, that one thing that happened to dictate how we're going to see the future? So, you know, another example of this is you may meet someone with, say, purple hair who wasn't kind to you. And now you believe that everyone who has purple hair is unkind. Okay. Now, hopefully we don't go to that extreme, but, you know, we've all, you know, someone says, oh, you should name your kid, whatever. And then you go, no, I knew this kid in elementary school with that name and they were awful. So I'm not going, you know, so we do use those past experiences that way. So we're deleting, distorting, and generalizing information based on our personal filters, such as our values, our beliefs, language, memories, and experiences. So all experience is subjective based on this process. And like, I'm just going to say that again, because it's super important. All experience is subjective because it's based on what we filtered, right? And yet sometimes we're really to fall on that sword when we don't need to, okay? So this is why each of us have a different experience of the same event. I had the most hilarious thing happen. I was visiting with my aunt and uncle who went on one of these, I call it a sheep tour of Europe. So 10 countries in 10 days, you're on and off a coach, you're just herded like sheep. And, okay, here's the Eiffel Tower. You have 5 minutes, right? And everyone takes their picture. And so anyway, they're back from the trip and they're telling us about the trip. And honest to God, I thought they went on 2 different trips. Because he would say, oh, blah, blah, blah happened. She's like, no, that's not what happened. And then she would tell another story. And I'm like, are you sure you guys went to Europe together? Because I'm hearing 2 totally different trips. But when you're moving so fast, like on those kind of tours, you don't have a lot of time to really, it's not like you sat for the day on the beach and you can agree that you sat for the day on the beach. You just were seeing one thing after another. So they had very different filters when they were talking about that trip. So it's important to have understanding of others when they're sharing things, because your mind's going, what are they talking about? Like, that's not what happened. Especially, you know, divorce, right, Sue? I won't even go there. So as we run our experience through our filters, we're creating our own internal representation of this information. It's like an internal movie of the information based on our filters. So this is your emotional state or your response. So your thoughts determine how you feel about your experience, right? You might feel happy, sad, angry, and that shows up in your physiology. So, you know, your face. It's like, you know, did I wear my inside face? Outside, people are going to see what you look like, right? So along with that, one of those things is belief. So I'm just going to touch really briefly on beliefs, and then Julie's going to talk more about goals. So in order to discover the beliefs that you hold about yourself, you need to, here, I'll just move this forward. You can listen to your inner voice. Okay, so when you start hearing yourselves, like if you were eavesdropping on yourself, what are you hearing? Often it's things you would never say out loud to your best friend about them, right? whether it's they often start with I can't, I never, I don't, I'm too whatever. I'm too old to do this. So these are going to give you clues to what your limiting beliefs are. Okay. So you want to pay attention to them, because often a limiting belief is the opposite to what you tell the world you believe. All right. So again, my stepson, he did a whole NLP program himself, which was great, because then I can use this language with him to call him on his. Anyway, I said, you told me you learned that one of your highest values is honesty, and yet he lies a lot. So I'm looking at his actions. So there's something that's stopping him from being who he says he is. Okay, so that's some kind of limiting belief. So that's a clue, because if you say, oh, yes, one of my highest values is gratitude, and you find yourself complaining all the time, something in between there is a belief. I'm just going to let someone in that is stopping you from living who you say you are. All right, so I'm going to turn it back to Julie now to share a little bit about goals, manifesting, and intention. She's amazing at this.
Thanks, Anita. It's really funny, actually, that when I get this feedback a lot on Facebook when people are watching my life and how I am living my life and manifesting the things that some people think, oh, my goodness, that sounds like that's something that's very difficult to do. And for those of you that don't know me, following the death of my fiance, I wanted to leave the legacy for him. And we had talked briefly about running a retreat center, and he would be teaching salsa dancing, and then I would be doing my writing workshops and the things that I did to help people discover their stories. Now, Anita just talked about the distortion filter and how creativity can basically, you can create anything that does not exist right now, and that you can literally think into existence anything that you want. But first of all, you really do have to be very, very clear it is that you actually want, right? And that I think is where it's not just about setting goals, but it's about taking action. And it's about taking action as if it already is in existence. So, because we are creating it, right? But if you don't know what it is that you're creating, you can't create it. And this is really where a lot of people go wrong, because they say, oh, I put in my order for a better life. And it's like, well, but what does that actually mean? Or I put in my order for more money. And it's like, well, what does more money mean? I mean, having a goal of getting more money has no meaning. Like, the universe cannot answer your call because you haven't created anything, right? All you've done is said, I want money. You have to be able to create something, which means you have to have a very clear goal of what you want to create, and then you have to take action to actually get it. So my goal, my creation, the thing that I had to think into existence was, I want a building that's in Puerto Vallarta that is big enough for me to do my residential writing workshops and help people discover their stories. And I want it to have the largest dance floor in Puerto Vallarta so that we can actually teach salsa dancing or something better, right? So that's my order. It's very, very clear. It's a building that's big enough for me to have, maybe 50 up to 15 people to have writing workshops and have a place to stay and sleep. And at the same time, because we're in Mexico, it needs to have, you know, rooms that are quiet and big dance floor, right, to teach salsa dancing and to have salsa parties. So as you can see, I'm thinking into existence what I want. I am not saying, oh, it's got to be a villa by the beach and it's got to have 6 bedrooms. I don't have any of that on my goals. What I'm doing is I'm putting in an order for the purpose, for the end purpose, the end goal of what it is that I want. And so I didn't expect to be in a 5-story 10 apartment building. That was like the last thing on my mind. You know, at some point, I guess my idea in my humanness is that, you know, a retreat center is a 6-bed villa by the beach, right? But that obviously did not match what my requirements are, my goals that I gave. And my goals were very clearly that it had to have the largest dance floor in Puerto Vallarta, which would make for quite a big dance floor, right? Maybe for 50 people. And it would have like 15 bedrooms, because I want, you know, enough room to have 15 people come on a writing retreat and have a comfortable place to stay. So that's my goals. That's what I set. And what I ended up being directed to was an apartment building that's got 5 stories and a beautiful rooftop with an amazing ocean view, which would make a very large dance floor, right? And I would have be able to convert the apartments into the event space, to the workshop space, and have, you know, a boutique style hotel with enough beds for my purpose. Now, at the time, I had no idea how I was going to pay for this thing. Plus, I'm in Mexico. And at that time, I don't have my residency. I don't have a work permit. And I have no idea how to start a Mexican business corporation. But, you know, that doesn't matter. The point is, those were my goals. My goals were that in order to purchase a building that's big enough to meet those goals, I've got to be able to do these things. But I didn't know that until I started to do those things. Because remember, we're thinking into existence what it is that we are creating. So those things don't exist. Right now, I don't know that I'm supposed to get a Mexican corporation, or I don't know that I've got to, you know, get a work permit before I can get my Mexican corporation. You know, those things happen because I take action, right? I take action that, oh, here's a building that I've been led to, and it wasn't what I expected, but clearly it fits all of those action to think it into existence. And so that's what I am doing. I am basically going, okay, well, we just move forward. This is my building. This is my retreat center. It absolutely fits all of the requirements. And now I've just got to take action of the steps one at a time as I'm led to continue to create and to think it into existence. And so this is the building I have. I discovered it in April. I moved in as a tenant, just renting one of the apartments. And from the moment that I moved into the building, I decided this was my building. You know, there was no other version of this. There was no other version of me going back to Canada or finding a different apartment, or the only version that I had was that this is my retreat center. And just keep moving forward, taking the action steps that you have to take in order to make it my retreat center, and that everything happens in a timely manner to make that work. And that is exactly what happened. And so, you know, every step of the way, there are challenges that we face. And But because I knew that I was creating this, and I knew that this is meant to be, every time I had 1 minute of doubt, I would just say, if this is to be, let it be. Because I know that there's greater powers, and for me, Azuka on the other side was definitely guiding me for many of these steps and helping me to create this dream. But as Anita says, at the end of the day, the most important thing is to understand that anything is possible. We are the creators. We think things into existence. But you do have to know what it is that you want. And that's why Anita and I have partnered together to actually help you understand, what do you actually want, right? Work through that in a kind of mastermind situation, asking the right questions so that you understand what is it that you want to create, and in as much detail as you can, or something better. So that's what we are working on together to help people do. And I use the tool of a book to really help you get a lot of clarity, because we do have all those clues in our life. We've already had insight on experiences, and funny enough, the more time I've spent in this building, the more I'm like, oh, well, that's why. Oh, I remember now that I went to Mexico City with Azuka, who was my fiance, and we went to Frida's museum. And I clearly remember saying to him, oh, when we get a home together in Mexico, I am going to use Frida's colors, because I just love Frida's colors. And that was my inspiration for this house. It's everything is has the colors of Mexico. Frida, who is a very inspirational artist, if you don't know the story, and all of her colors are very bright colors. Pinks, you see some of them behind me, the pinks and the turquoise and blues and yellows. And that was my inspiration for decoration. And I didn't falter one moment from it, because I knew I had set that intention 2.5 years ago when I was with Azuka. I said, when we have a home together in Mexico, it's going to be these colors. So I already knew what this place was going to look like, because I'd already set those intentions. And I literally went to the paint shop with pictures of Frida's museum and said, this is my color palette. And that's how I created the decoration for this place. So we already have all those clues. We've already had those experiences. And in some way, we've already set some intentions as we've gone through our life. And so writing a book is how I help people to actually search for those clues. And I do that with mind mapping. So, you know, we literally, I say that we throw up and then we clean up, because we've got all of this stuff inside, right? We have got all of this ideas and creativity just like buzzing around in our head. Oh, I could do this, I could do this, I could have this, I could have this, or maybe I should want this or this or this. So what we do first is we literally throw up all of those ideas on a mind map. And then I help people to start going through, examining and saying, is that what you really want? Because that's where we need to get that clarity. What do you really want? And why do you want it? Because that's even more important, because if you don't understand why you want it, it's not going to be, doesn't have the motivation to be born into creativity. So what do you want and why do you want it? Those are the two things and the big questions for now in this short amount of time that we can help you. If you can just start examining those two questions, that would be something that I think would at least put you on the path to set some goals with some clarity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great, Julie, because, you know, the other part of knowing what you want and why you want it is feeling it. So a good clue to know, is that really what I want, is when you close your eyes and picture that, how do you feel? Like, because if we set a goal and don't attach feeling to it, it's just something we've written on a piece of paper. And, you know, there's people out there say, just repeat that sentence, I am whatever, 100 times a day and it'll happen. But I don't believe that's true. If you don't feel it, if you don't feel I am that, like I really am that, it's just something you've written down and it's not clear enough for the universe to deliver it.
Yes.
So, one of the things Julie touched on is experiences. And that's super important. Like for some people, if you don't even know what your goals are, start with what experiences do I want to have in this life, right? So even though Julie wanted, like 2.5 years ago, she wanted a retreat center, she did experiences along the way. She went salsa dancing. She didn't wait for the big, largest dance floor in Puerto Vallarta to go salsa dancing. She would go, and each time she would go, that would cement the feeling even further, right? Because it was an experience that she had, which gives us feelings. And that feeling is what helps us really understand. I do really want that because I feel so good when I'm salsa dancing. And then that brings to light even more that goal she had of having the largest dance floor. So our focus when on just the goal is about achieving that target sometimes. And then once we've achieved it, we're like, okay, what's next? And we go on to the next goal. And we don't always spend the time to celebrate the success or feel the experiences that we've had along the way that Julie talks about. Sometimes we need to write the book to even remember them, right?
Yes.
Like when I was 9, I bought a book on teaching myself Spanish. Now I'm come from a German speaking household and not Spanish. Nobody spoke Spanish. My name's Anita, which means little Anne in Spanish. My mom's name is Anne. So how that happened, I don't know. But I somehow knew in my core that something about Spanish was going to be important to me. And I bought that book and I learned the name for things, El Banco. I remember all these little pictures of things and learning the name. And I was 9. Right. I ended up marrying a guy who was from South America. I ended up starting a company that did adventure travel to Latin America. And I've spent many, many weeks and months in Latin America, but I didn't know that when I was 9. Right. But the feeling that I got when I spoke Spanish or heard Spanish is what built the goal. Okay. So enjoy the journey and celebrate all those little successes. There's a great, if you're into podcasts, there's a guy named Andrew Huberman. He's got a podcast, and he's a neuroscientist. So it's about the brain, but it's very science-based. And he talks about the importance of celebrating the little successes. So if your goal is to climb Mount Everest, what you have to do is, I made it on day 1 to base camp 1. Celebrate that success, not wait for the big goal success, because when we celebrate those little successes, and they might seem insignificant to you, like if you're going through a hard thing in your life and you're like, I made it through this day. Sometimes that can be your success. Some days that is the success, right? And we need to celebrate that. And we can celebrate with a glass of wine. That's really kind of fun way to celebrate it. But it's really important for our brain, and that's studied scientifically, to celebrate all those little successes along the way. So focus on enjoying the journey because you can experience it now. You don't have to wait for the goal. Every day is a chance for you to focus on that journey and the success of that day. So that kind of brings us to the end. I'm just going to again share screen with you. And it won't let me do this. Okay.
Recognize that photo? I think I
I
might have
do.
taken that.
Yes, that photo was New Year's Eve in Puerto Vallarta. So if you want to go deeper into some of the things that we shared, and hopefully you learned a lot of little things that can help you even today with what you're experiencing in your life. But if you want more, what better place to do it than Casa de Influencia, which is Julie's retreat center in Puerto Vallarta. We're going to be running a 10-day retreat together starting December 29th. And it's going to be at Julie's Retreat Center. And the first few days is just going to be enjoying the beach, enjoying New Year's Eve on her rooftop patio, watching the fireworks and all of that. And then we're going to spend the next week with workshops in the mornings and lots of time in the afternoon for writing, speaking, doing a podcast, exploring Puerto Vallarta, and having fun. And we have lots of little fun things built in it along the way. So this, I don't know if you can picture yourself, this is her rooftop patio right here. Picture yourself in one of those loungers looking over the ocean. I know Julie can go upstairs and do it right now. And I'm heading out on Saturday, so I'll be spending some time in Mexico for the next month or two, hanging out with Julie and doing some work there. So if you're interested in joining us, as I said, it starts on December 29th. And for more information, you can go to Influence Publishing website. You'll find this link, the New Year Retreat link. And because you joined us today, we're offering you $200 discount on the trip. Just tell us the code NEWYOU and we'll know that you were on this webinar, and then that will be offered to you.
It's going to be amazing to have the opportunity to be able to set your goals for 2023 whilst you're in an atmosphere, and we call it the co-creation center here. So because as soon as people walk into the space, you feel creative. And honestly, I can't think of a better place to actually set your goals for 2023. You need to be in a mastermind style environment. This is not something you can do by yourself. You can't just like sit there in your bedroom and start making a list of what do I want. You know, you really do need to be in the company of other people that can spark you and give you ideas and ask you more questions so that you can delve deeper. And between Anita and myself, we've got some great tools to help you do that in an amazing creative environment. And as Anita said, we've got some cool things that we're going to do, take you to on a boat trip to a secluded beach where you get to really relax and get creative with your feet in the sand. We have amazing music talent here. We are going to be taking you to an amazing restaurant where you have Broadway singers, traditional Mexican dancing, and everything from the last time we were there, we had the 3 tenors singing some songs for us as well. So you get to really experience the true Mexico. Sorry, what did you say, Bob?
Is that at La Capella?
Yes,
Beautiful.
You've been there before.
Yeah, Louis Whitaker and the 3 tenors, and
Yes.
beautiful setting.
It is. It's really, and it's literally 3 blocks from me. So we walk there. That's my neighborhood. So you know the neighborhood.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. So I hope that you can join us. If you are listening to this and you didn't make it live, but you're listening to the recording, then you can use that same coupon code to get the $200 off the retreat price. That then makes this an amazing deal. $1,295. Is that right, Tanita? That's right.
After the discount, yeah.
Yeah, so $1,295 for 10 days here, plus excursions and a whole lot of fun. So I hope you can join us.
Yeah, thanks all for being here. We've used up our full hour. So again, thank you for taking time out of your day and your schedule to join us. And we will hopefully see you in Mexico.
In Puerto Vallarta.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, thank you.